News of Jiho Park's theory spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within a week, his presentation had been viewed billions of times. Universities on 100 worlds were discussing it. Some praised it as revolutionary, others criticized it as unscientific nonsense. But everyone was talking about it. The conversation changed how many civilizations viewed themselves. The Thren government released a statement defending their education system, insisting that logic and reason were still valuable traits. But privately, many Thren parents began wondering if they had pushed their children too hard, taught them too young, taken away something precious in their rush to create intelligent citizens. Similar conversations happened on dozens of worlds. The Velocians, the Kelran, even the ancient and wise Mortith species began questioning their assumptions about progress and intelligence. If the Varanthi had truly built a test that only a playing child could pass, what did that say about the path most civilizations followed? At the Galactic Council headquarters, diplomats debated what this meant for humanity's place in the galaxy. Humans were still newcomers, still considered primitive by many species, but they had accomplished something the oldest, wisest civilizations could not. That demanded respect, even if it made some species uncomfortable. On Helion 7, the Academy went through massive changes. The station director, after many long discussions with her staff, announced the creation of a new research division. It would be called the Department of Intuitive Problem Solving, and it would study the kinds of thinking that traditional science often overlooked. Jiho Park was asked to lead it. He accepted, though he insisted he would need help. "I can't do this alone," he told the director. "This needs input from artists, children, musicians, people who think differently. We've spent too long letting only one type of thinker define what counts as intelligence." Dr. Vross surprised everyone by requesting a transfer to the new department. "I have spent 40 years being wrong about the cube," he said simply. "Perhaps it is time I learned to be wrong in new and interesting ways." His colleagues didn't know what to make of this. The famous Dr. Kalen Vross, known throughout the galaxy for his logical mind and serious approach to archaeology, joining a department focused on intuition and play. It seemed impossible, but Dr. Vross was serious. He had watched Hana open the cube dozens of times now, and each time he learned something new. Not about the cube itself, but about how much he didn't understand about thinking and learning and approaching problems. The Thren scientist began spending time with Hana regularly. At first, Yuna was protective, worried that he wanted to study her daughter like a specimen. But Dr. Vross surprised her. "I do not want to study your daughter," he told Yuna honestly. "I want her to teach me." "Teach you what?" "How to play again, if I ever knew how." So Hana and Dr. Vross began having weekly sessions in his laboratory. Except they weren't really lab sessions. They were play dates. Hana would bring her toys and Dr. Vross would watch how she interacted with them. She would build towers just to knock them down. She would mix up puzzle pieces from different sets to create new pictures. She would use scientific equipment as props for elaborate pretend games. At first, Dr. Vross just observed, taking notes. But slowly, carefully, Hana drew him into her games. She handed him toy figures and told him to make them talk. She asked him to build with her blocks, to color in her coloring books, to play simple games that had no real purpose except fun. It was harder for him than any quantum equation he had ever solved. His brain kept trying to find patterns, rules, optimal strategies. Hana would laugh and tell him he was thinking too hard again. "It's just for fun," she would say. "You don't have to be good at it." Slowly, over weeks and months, Dr. Vross began to understand what she meant. He started to relax during their sessions. He built towers that were deliberately unstable because they looked interesting. He drew pictures that didn't represent anything real. He played. One day, Hana handed him the Varanthi cube. "You try now," she said. Dr. Vross's first instinct was to tense up, to focus, to think about the sequence. But he caught himself. He took a deep breath and tried to approach the cube the way Hana did. Like it was a toy, not a test. Like it was fun, not serious. The first panel didn't move under his touch. Neither did the second. But Dr. Vross didn't feel frustrated this time. He just kept exploring, pushing different panels gently, seeing what happened, not trying to solve anything. Just playing. The cube still didn't open for him that day, or the next week, or the month after that, but he found he didn't mind as much anymore. The journey itself had value, even without success. Meanwhile, the data from the Varanthi cube continued to reveal secrets. Linguists worked to translate the information, and what they found amazed everyone. The cube contained star charts marking 17 locations across the galaxy. Each one was labeled with a different Varanthi symbol. "They're more caches," Rilth explained excitedly at a research meeting. 17 other sites where the Varanthi left artifacts. This was just the first test. Expeditions were organized immediately. The Galactic Council funded missions to each location. Scientists from every member species volunteered to join the search teams. Everyone wanted to know what other tests the Varanthi had created. The Kim family was invited to join one of the expeditions, but Yuna declined. "Hana is 7 now," she said. "She needs stability, friends, school. We're not dragging her across the galaxy to open boxes for scientists." Some people were disappointed, but most understood. Hana had already given the galaxy an incredible gift. She deserved a normal childhood. The first expedition returned 6 months later with a new artifact. It looked like a musical instrument, covered in strings that vibrated with different colors. Nobody could figure out how to play it properly. They brought it back to Helion 7 and hesitantly asked if Hana would look at it. She sat with the instrument for an hour, plucking strings and watching the colors. Then she smiled and began to play a simple melody. The instrument responded, creating harmonies that nobody had programmed into it. It was learning, adapting, playing along with her. "It's making music with me," Hana said, delighted. "It's like having a friend who always knows what song you want to sing." The researchers recorded everything, trying to understand the principle at work. But once again, the answer was simpler than they expected. The instrument didn't respond to perfect technique or music theory. It responded to joy, to the pure pleasure of making sounds. Over the next year, more artifacts were recovered from Varanthi sites. Each one required a different approach, but they all shared a common theme. They didn't respond to pure logic or technical skill. They responded to emotion, to playfulness, to qualities that most civilizations had forgotten to value. Humanity, being still young and not yet set in their ways, often had the best results. But interestingly, children from other species started succeeding too. Once they were encouraged to play instead of study, a young Kelran figured out how to make a Varanthi sculpture move. A Thoran teenager solved a color puzzle that had stumped adult scientists for months. The galaxy was learning slowly that intelligence came in many forms. That growing up didn't have to mean growing serious. That advancement didn't have to mean losing touch with wonder and joy. Dr. Vross published a paper that became famous. It was called The Academy's Blind Spot: How Institutional Thinking Prevented Progress. In it, he wrote honestly about his own mistakes, his 40 years of approaching the cube with the wrong mindset. He wrote about what he had learned from a 6-year-old human child. "We built institutions that valued only certain kinds of thinking," he wrote. "We created systems that rewarded logic and punished whimsy. We taught our young to solve problems and forgot to teach them to play." The Varanthi knew that truly advanced civilizations would not make this mistake. They left their test to remind us. Wisdom takes many forms, and sometimes the smallest among us are the wisest teachers. The paper was required reading at universities across the galaxy. Some professors taught it alongside traditional logic courses. Others created entire new classes about different types of intelligence. On Helion 7, above the Academy's main entrance, a new inscription was added. It was carved in the languages of every council member species, including the newly added human languages. The words were simple: "Wisdom takes many forms. Sometimes it comes from the smallest among us." Below the inscription, a small statue was placed. It showed a human child sitting cross-legged, holding a cube, smiling. The sculptor had captured Hana perfectly, her face full of joy and wonder. Hana herself found the statue embarrassing. She was 7 now and thought it was weird that aliens had made a statue of her, but her parents took pictures anyway, proud beyond words. Life on Helion 7 settled into a new normal. The Kim family stayed, becoming permanent residents. Yuna continued her linguistics work. Taeyang helped design improvements to the station's systems, and Hana went to school with other children, both human and alien, making friends and being mostly normal. Except every Tuesday afternoon, she still visited Dr. Vross's laboratory. They would play games, work on puzzles, and sometimes just talk. The old Thren scientist and the young human girl had become unlikely friends. One day, Hana asked him something that made him pause. The breakthrough came from someone nobody expected. Jiho Park was a cognitive psychologist who had arrived at Helion 7 as part of the same cultural exchange program as the Kim family. He was a quiet man in his 40s who studied how different species thought and learned. Most people barely noticed him because he spent his time in the library, reading research papers and taking notes. But Jiho had been watching everything with great interest. He had reviewed all the footage of Hana opening the cube. He had observed the frustrated attempts by other researchers, and he had spent many hours simply watching children play in the station's community areas, comparing them to how adults interacted with new objects. One evening, Jiho requested a meeting with Dr. Vross. The Thren scientist almost declined. He was exhausted from weeks of failed experiments and had no patience for another theory that would lead nowhere. But something about the psychologist's quiet confidence made him agree. They met in a small conference room. Jiho brought a bag with him which he set on the table without explanation. Dr. Vross settled his 4 legs into a resting position and waited. "Dr. Vross, I have a question for you," Jiho began in his soft voice. "When you approach the cube, what are you trying to do?" "Open it, obviously," Dr. Vross replied, struggling to keep the irritation out of his voice. "No, I mean, what is your mindset? What are you thinking about?" Dr. Vross's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. "I'm thinking about the sequence of movements required, the pressure needed for each panel, the order of operations. I'm trying to solve the puzzle." "Exactly," Jiho said, and he smiled. "That's the problem. You're treating it like a puzzle. It is a puzzle." "No, Dr. Vross, it's not." Jiho reached into his bag and pulled out what looked like a colorful plastic cube, much smaller than the Varanthi artifact. It had different colored squares on each side. "Do you know what this is? Some kind of human toy? It's called a Rubik's Cube. It's been popular on Earth for centuries. You twist and turn the sections to get all the same colors on each side. It's a puzzle." Jiho demonstrated, his fingers moving quickly to scramble the colors. "When someone picks this up, they try to solve it. They think about algorithms and patterns. They approach it with logic." He set the Rubik's Cube down and pulled out another object. This one was a wooden box covered in buttons and switches. "This is a busy box. We make these for babies and toddlers. Each button does something different. One makes a sound. One lights up. One opens a little door. Children don't try to solve this. They play with it. They push buttons to see what happens. No strategy, no plan. Just exploration and fun." Dr. Vross stared at the 2 human toys. "I don't understand your point." "The Varanthi cube isn't a Rubik's Cube," Jiho said gently. "It's a busy box. It's not designed to be solved. It's designed to be played with." The Thren scientist felt a strange sensation, like the mental equivalent of the ground shifting beneath his feet. That's not possible. The Varanthi were an advanced civilization. They wouldn't create something so simple." "Why not? Who says advanced civilizations can't value play?" Jiho pulled out his tablet and showed Dr. Vross a video he had compiled. "Look at this. Every species that has tried to open the cube approaches it the same way. They analyze it. They plan their moves. They treat it like a test they need to pass." The video showed dozens of attempts by various scientists, all moving slowly and deliberately, their faces serious and focused. "Now watch Hana." The next clip showed the little girl picking up the cube. Her face was relaxed, curious, happy. Her hands moved instinctively, exploring the object without any visible planning. She was smiling. She was humming to herself. She looked like she was having fun. "She's not trying to solve anything," Jiho explained. "She's just playing. And that's what the cube responds to." Dr. Vross wanted to argue, but the evidence was right there in the video. He thought back to every time he had approached the cube. He had always been tense, focused, determined. He had treated every attempt like an examination he needed to pass. "But that doesn't explain why other human children couldn't open it," Dr. Vross said. "You tested several." "Because most children lose that pure sense of play as they get older," Jiho replied. "By age 7 or 8, especially in our modern world, children start to approach things with goals and expectations. They learn there are right ways and wrong ways to do things. They start to worry about failing." He paused. "Hana is 6. She's still in that magical window where play is pure exploration without fear or judgment. Rilth, who had been listening through the door, entered the room. Her skin was bright yellow with excitement. So the cube is a test, but not the kind we thought. It's not testing intelligence or knowledge. It's testing the ability to play. Or more specifically, Jiho added, it's testing whether a species has maintained the capacity for pure, judgment-free exploration even as they advance technologically. The Varanthi wanted to know, as you became smarter, did you forget how to play? Dr. Vross sat silently processing this information. It challenged everything he believed about science and progress. His species, the Thren, were proud of their logical minds. They educated their children from a very young age, teaching them to think critically and approach problems systematically. Play was seen as something primitive, something to outgrow quickly. What if they had been wrong? What if they had lost something important? I want to test this theory, Dr. Vross said finally. But how? I cannot simply stop being logical and start playing. That's not how my brain works. I know, Jiho said sympathetically, and that might be exactly what the Varanthi wanted to demonstrate. Some things can't be forced or learned through study. Some abilities once lost are very hard to get back. Over the next few days, Jiho presented his theory to the wider scientific community on the station. The response was mixed. Many scientists found it insulting. They had spent years studying and training, and now they were being told that a child's approach was somehow superior to theirs. But others, like Dr. Vross, found the theory fascinating. It explained everything they had observed. Why only Hana could open the cube. Why copying her movements exactly didn't work. Why thinking harder about the problem made it worse, not better. Jiho created a presentation showing his research. He compared brain scans of Hana playing with the cube to scans of adults attempting to open it. The differences were striking. Hana's brain showed activity in areas associated with exploration and joy. The adults showed activity in areas associated with problem-solving and stress. The cube could somehow detect this difference. The Varanthi had built something that responded not just to physical touch, but to intention and mindset. It was technology far beyond anything the current galaxy could create. The Varanthi left this as a message, Jiho concluded in his presentation to a packed lecture hall. They weren't just testing if we were smart enough to find them or understand their technology. They were testing if we had maintained something precious that many civilizations lose as they advance. The ability to approach the unknown with joy instead of fear, to explore without needing to control, to play without needing to win. Dr. Vross sat in the front row, his three eyes fixed on the human psychologist. He felt something he rarely experienced, admiration mixed with sadness. Admiration for the elegant simplicity of the theory, sadness because he realized his own species might have failed this test long ago. After the presentation, dozens of scientists approached Jiho with questions and arguments. Some still insisted there must be a physical explanation. Others wanted to know if adults could relearn how to play, if the cube might open for them with training. Dr. Vross waited until the crowd cleared before approaching. Your theory is sound, he said simply. I believe you are correct. But now we face a new question. What's that? If the Varanthi were selecting for species that maintain playfulness, what were they selecting them for? What comes next? The Thren scientist gestured to the holographic data still being analyzed from the cube. The information we've recovered mentions 17 other cache sites. Other artifacts. Other tests perhaps, Jiho nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that too. If this was test 1, and it required the mind of a playing child to pass, what did the other test require? They both turned to look out the window of the lecture hall. Below in the observation deck, little Hana was playing with other children building a tower out of blocks. She was laughing, completely unaware that she had just changed the entire galaxy's understanding of intelligence and progress. Whatever they require, Dr. Vross said quietly, I suspect humanity will surprise us again. The next 3 days were chaos. The Kim family was moved to a private suite in the Academy's residential wing, where they were guarded by security officers. Not because anyone thought they were dangerous, but because reporters and scientists from across the galaxy were trying to reach them. The communication systems on Helion 7 were overloaded with requests for interviews, research proposals, and demands for access to the human child who had accomplished the impossible. Hana didn't understand any of it. She just wanted to go back to playing in their quarters, but her parents were stressed and busy with meetings. Strange aliens came to visit every few hours. asking her the same questions over and over. How did you open the cube? I just played with it. What were you thinking about when you touched it? Nothing really. It looked fun. Did you see a pattern in the symbols? They were pretty, like stickers. The researchers went away frustrated every time. Her answers were too simple. There had to be more to it. She must have seen something they missed, noticed some mathematical pattern, understood some hidden code. A child couldn't just randomly solve a 300-year-old mystery, but she had. Dr. Vross spent those 3 days reviewing every second of security footage. He watched Hannah approach the cube, pick it up, and manipulate it with her small hands. He slowed down the recording, analyzed every movement, measured every angle and timing. He created a perfect digital model of exactly what she had done. Then he tried to replicate it. The cube could be closed again. It was designed that way. Once closed, it returned to its sealed state, waiting to be opened once more. Dr. Vross closed it carefully and stood before it with his notes. He pushed the first panel, exactly where Hannah had pushed it. Nothing happened. The panel didn't move. He tried again with more force. Still nothing. He adjusted his angle, tried using different amounts of pressure, attempted it from various positions. The cube remained sealed. Frustrated, Dr. Vross called in other researchers. Perhaps it required a different species to open it. A Kelran scientist tried, following the same sequence. Nothing. A Velosian engineer tried. Nothing. A mathematical genius from the Thorin homeworld spent 6 hours calculating the exact force and timing needed, then attempted to open the cube with precision instruments. Still nothing. Finally, someone suggested the obvious solution. They needed to ask the human child to demonstrate again. Una was protective of her daughter. She's not a laboratory experiment, she told the station director firmly. She's a 6-year-old child who opened a box. That's all. That box contains knowledge from an extinct civilization that predates most species in the galaxy, the director replied. This is the most important archaeological find in modern history. Surely you understand the significance? I understand that my daughter is tired and confused and surrounded by strangers who keep treating her like she's some kind of alien herself, Una said sharply. She did you all a favor by opening your box. Now you want to study her like she's one of your artifacts. Taeyang stood beside his wife, his arms crossed. We came here for a cultural exchange, not to have our daughter poked and prodded by scientists. The director's purple skin darkened slightly with embarrassment. You're right. I apologize. But perhaps we could ask her to open the cube one more time, just to see if it was a one-time occurrence or if she can repeat the process. We would make sure she's comfortable, and both of you would be present. Una looked at her husband. They had a silent conversation with their eyes, the kind that parents develop after years of marriage. Finally, Una sighed. We'll ask her. But if she says no, that's the end of it. Hannah, surprisingly, was excited to try again. She had been cooped up in their quarters for 3 days with nothing to do. Playing with the pretty box sounded better than watching her parents have stressed conversations with aliens. They gathered in a private research lab, smaller and quieter than the exhibition hall. Only essential people were allowed inside. Dr. Vross, his assistant Rilth, the station director, Hannah's parents, and 2 security officers. Everyone else watched through video feeds. The cube sat on a table at child height. Dr. Vross had carefully closed it, returning it to its sealed state. The symbols on its surface glowed faintly, waiting. Hi again, box, Hannah said cheerfully, approaching the table. Dr. Vross noticed she spoke to it like it was alive. He found that interesting. Most species in the galaxy had long ago stopped attributing consciousness to inanimate objects. It was considered primitive thinking. Hannah picked up the cube with both hands. Immediately the symbols began to glow brighter, just like before. She tilted it, examining the surfaces, her small fingers exploring the edges and panels. There you are, she said softly. Finding the first panel, she pushed it and it clicked inward smoothly. Dr. Vross's 3 eyes widened. Under his touch, that panel had been completely locked. But for her it moved easily. Hannah twisted another section and it rotated. She slid a 3rd panel sideways, pushed a 4th one down, and then twisted the whole top section 90 degrees. The cube began to open, its panels folding outward in the same beautiful sequence as before. Within a minute, it was fully open, holographic displays once again filling the air above it. See? Easy, Hana said, smiling at her parents. The scientist stared in stunned silence. She had done it again, just as effortlessly as the first time. Now you try, Hana said, offering the cube to Dr. Vross. The Thren scientist carefully took the cube from her small hands. It felt cold in his grip, different from how she had described it. He triggered the closing sequence, watching as the panels folded back inward and locked into place. Then, following his detailed notes, he attempted to open it again. He pushed the first panel exactly where Hana had pushed it, with the same amount of force she had used. Nothing. He tried 17 more times, each attempt following her movements precisely. He tried with more force, less force, faster, slower. He tried talking to it like she had. He tried thinking happy thoughts. He tried approaching it with no expectations. The cube refused to open. Frustrated and confused, Dr. Vross handed the cube back to Hana. Try again, please. She took it, and within seconds, the first panel clicked inward at her touch. She stopped there as requested and handed it back to him. The panel was still pressed in. Dr. Vross could see it clearly. He pushed the second panel in the sequence. Nothing happened. He pushed every panel on the entire cube. None of them moved. He handed it back to Hana, feeling defeated. She pressed the second panel and it slid sideways smoothly. Why? Dr. Vross said. And he wasn't really asking anyone in particular. Why does it work for her but not for me? We're following the exact same procedure. Maybe it likes me better, Hana suggested. Several scientists in the room immediately dismissed this idea. Objects didn't have preferences. They didn't like anyone. They responded to physical and chemical inputs according to the laws of physics. The idea that the cube was choosing to open for a child but not for adults was absurd. But Rilth, the young Kelrin assistant, tilted her head thoughtfully. Her skin shifted to a contemplative blue color. What if she's right? She said quietly. Dr. Vross turned to look at her. What? What if the cube is designed to respond differently to different types of beings? Not species exactly, but something else. Some quality that the child has, but we don't. That's not how physical objects work, another scientist said firmly. The Varanthi were millions of years more advanced than us, Rilth pointed out. We have no idea what they were capable of. Maybe they built something that does work that way. Dr. Vross considered this. It went against everything he understood about science and logic. But then again, he had spent 40 years being wrong about the cube. Perhaps it was time to consider ideas that seemed impossible. Over the next week, they tested the theory. They brought in children from other species. A young Kelrin barely old enough to walk, a Thorin teenager, a Velocian child. None of them could open the cube. They brought in other human adults from the station. Engineers, scientists, a maintenance worker. None of them could open it either. Only Hana could make it work. It's not about being human, Yuna said, watching her daughter easily open the cube for the 20th time that week. And it's not just about being a child. So what is it? Dr. Vross had no answer. For the first time in his long career, he was facing a problem that logic alone couldn't solve. The cube was teaching him a lesson he had never wanted to learn. Sometimes intelligence wasn't enough. Sometimes knowledge wasn't enough. Sometimes there were other qualities that mattered more. He just had to figure out what those qualities were. The cube was lighter than Hana expected. When she picked it up with both hands, it felt like holding a box made of warm wood, not cold metal. The humming grew louder, but it wasn't scary. It reminded her of the sound her grandmother's music box made, a gentle vibration that tickled her palms. She sat down on the floor, crossing her legs the way she did when playing with her toys at home. The symbols on the cube's surface glowed brighter under her touch, shifting from blue to soft purple to pale green. They were so pretty. They looked like the holographic stickers she had on her bedroom wall back on Earth. Hana tilted the cube, watching how the light played across its surface. One section felt different from the others, slightly raised. She pushed it gently with her thumb and it clicked inward with a satisfying sound. She giggled. That was fun, she whispered to herself in Korean. She turned the cube over in her hands, exploring it the way she explored everything new. Another panel felt like it might move. She tried twisting it, and to her delight, it rotated smoothly. The symbols in that section began to glow brighter, forming a pattern that looked like flowers blooming. Far above her, 3 floors up in his office, Dr. Vross was explaining to Yuna and Taeyang the difference between quantum archaeology and traditional archaeology. He was in the middle of a sentence when every screen in his office suddenly lit up with red alerts. The Thren scientist froze. His three eyes widened as he read the data streaming across his displays. The Varanthi cube's quantum signature was changing, actually changing. In 300 years of monitoring, the cube had maintained exactly the same energy pattern. It never varied, not even by the smallest measurement until now. "Impossible," Dr. Vross whispered. Then louder, "Impossible." He spun around, his four legs carrying him toward the door at a speed that made the humans jump back in surprise. "The cube!" "Something is happening to the cube." Yuna and Taeyang exchanged confused looks and then hurried after him. They ran through corridors and down ramps, the Thren scientist moving faster than they thought possible for someone with such short legs. Other researchers heard the commotion and joined them, until a small crowd was racing toward the exhibition hall. Dr. Vross burst through the doors, his breathing heavy, his three eyes scanning the room frantically. The cube was not on its pedestal. His heart nearly stopped. Had it been stolen? Had it fallen? Then he saw her. A small human child sat on the floor in the center of the room, her legs crossed, black hair falling around her face as she bent over something in her lap. The Varanthi cube. She was holding the Varanthi cube, and she was playing with it like it was a simple toy. "Stop!" Dr. Vross shouted, but his voice came out as a strangled whisper. He tried again, louder. "Child, stop what you are doing!" Hana looked up, startled by the sudden noise. She saw her parents running toward her, looking worried. Behind them was Dr. Vross and a bunch of other aliens, all staring at her with wide eyes. Had she done something wrong? "Hana," her mother called out, and there was fear in her voice. "Put that down carefully." But Hana's hands had already moved. While everyone was yelling and running, she had found one more panel that felt like it wanted to move. She pushed it sideways, and something inside the cube clicked into place. The cube seemed to take a deep breath. Then it opened. Not all at once, but like a flower blooming in fast motion. Panels folded outward, revealing other panels beneath. Sections rotated and slid away, showing crystalline structures that caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. The humming grew into a musical chord, beautiful and complex. Everyone froze. The researchers, the security guards who had just arrived, Yuna and Taeyang, even Dr. Vross himself. They all stood perfectly still, watching as the impossible happened before their eyes. From the center of the now open cube, a holographic display erupted upward. It showed stars and planets, lines connecting them in patterns that looked like a map. Strange symbols appeared next to each star, and streams of data flowed through the air in a language that nobody recognized but everyone understood was important. The light from the hologram reflected off Hana's face, making her eyes shine with wonder. "Pretty," she said softly. Dr. Vross felt like his world had just turned upside down. For 40 years he had studied this object. He had approached it with the finest instruments science could create. He had written papers that were read by millions. He had dedicated his life to understanding the Varanthi cube, and a human child had just opened it by playing with it for less than 5 minutes. Yuna reached her daughter first, dropping to her knees beside the little girl. "Hana, are you okay?" "Did it hurt you?" "I'm fine, Mommy," Hana said, confused by all the fuss. "I was just playing with it. It's like my music box at home. You have to push the parts in the right order, and then it opens." Taeyang knelt beside his wife and daughter, his engineer's mind trying to process what had just happened. The cube was open, revealing technology that looked millions of years more advanced than anything humanity had created, and his 6-year-old daughter had unlocked it while he was discussing power couplings with an alien scientist. Dr. Vross slowly approached, his legs shaking slightly. He stared at the open cube, at the holographic display still showing its star maps and data streams, at the human child who sat calmly in the middle of it all. "How?" he asked, and his voice was barely above a whisper. "How did you do that?" Hana looked up at him, her small face scrunched in thought. "I don't know. I just played with it. It wanted to be opened, I think." More researchers crowded into the exhibition hall. Someone was taking pictures. Someone else was recording video. A security officer spoke urgently into his communicator, calling for the station director. Within minutes, news of what happened would spread throughout the academy. then the station, then across the entire galactic network. A human child had solved the galaxy's greatest archaeological mystery in less than 5 minutes. By treating it like a toy, Dr. Vross felt a strange emotion he had not experienced in many years. It was humility mixed with confusion with a touch of embarrassment. He had been so certain that the cube required advanced knowledge to open. He had built complex theories about quantum locks and mathematical sequences. He had assumed that only the most logical, most educated minds could solve it. He had been completely wrong. "Dr. Vross," said a voice behind him. He turned to see Rilth, his young assistant, a Kelran with skin that changed colors based on emotion. Right now, she was flickering between purple and orange, showing her excitement and confusion. "The data from the cube, it's incredible. We're detecting information streams about Varanthe science, history, culture. This is the discovery of the millennium." Dr. Vross nodded slowly, but his 3 eyes remained fixed on the little human girl. She had stood up now, holding her mother's hand, looking worried that she might be in trouble. "Am I going to be punished?" Hannah asked in a small voice. "I didn't mean to break anything." Yuna hugged her daughter tightly. "You're not in trouble, sweetheart. You didn't break it. You opened it." "But everyone looks so surprised," Hannah said, looking around at all the staring aliens. "That's because you did something amazing," her father said, though he still looked shocked himself. "Something very important." The station director arrived, a tall Velocian with purple skin and 4 arms. She took one look at the open cube, at the holographic display, at the small human child, and her mouth fell open in shock. "Is this a joke?" she demanded. "Someone tell me this is not real." "It's real, Director," Dr. Vross said quietly. "The Varanthe cube has been opened." "By this human child." The director stared at him, then at Hannah, then back at him. "How?" "I am working on understanding that myself," Dr. Vross admitted. More people arrived. Scientists from other departments, teachers, students, station workers who had heard the news and come to see if it was true. The exhibition hall became crowded and noisy with excited voices speaking dozens of different languages. Through it all, Hannah stood close to her parents, overwhelmed by the attention. She didn't understand why everyone was making such a big deal about opening a box. It hadn't been that hard. You just had to feel where the pieces wanted to go and push them gently. Dr. Vross looked at the cube, then at the child, then back at the cube. 300 years of mystery, solved in minutes by someone who wasn't even trying to solve it, someone who just wanted to play. The Thren scientist had spent his entire life believing in logic, in careful study, in the power of knowledge and patience. Now he wondered what else he had been wrong about. The space station Helion 7 floated in the darkness between stars, a massive wheel of metal and light that housed the greatest minds in the galaxy. For 300 years, the Galactic Xenoarchaeology Academy had stood as the most important place for studying ancient civilizations. Scientists from 100 different worlds came here to learn about the races that came before them. In the center of the Academy's grand exhibition hall, under bright lights and surrounded by scanning machines, sat the Varanthe cube. It was the size of a small watermelon, dark gray with symbols that seemed to shift and change when no one was looking directly at it. The cube hummed softly, giving off a faint blue glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. Dr. Kalen Vross had spent 40 years studying the cube. He was a Thren, a species known throughout the galaxy for their logical minds and patience. His body looked something like a large spider, with 4 legs and a round torso covered in smooth gray skin. His 3 eyes could see more colors than human eyes, and his brain could hold more information than 10 human brains combined. Every morning for the past 40 years, Dr. Vross entered the exhibition hall before anyone else arrived. He would stand before the cube, his eyes scanning the symbols, his mind running through equations and theories. He had written 17 papers about the cube. He had built dozens of machines to scan it, poke it, heat it, cool it, and blast it with every kind of energy known to science. Nothing worked. The cube remained sealed, keeping its secrets locked inside. The Thren scientist knew that thousands of others had tried before him. The galaxy's best mathematicians had studied the patterns on the cube's surface for decades. Quantum physicists had analyzed its energy signature. Linguists had tried to decode the symbols as a language. Archaeologists had researched everything known about the Varanthe, the extinct race that created the cube. All of them failed. The Varanthe had disappeared from the galaxy millions of years ago, leaving behind only ruins and a handful of artifacts. The cube was their greatest mystery. Most scientists believed it contained vast knowledge, perhaps the secret to the Varanthes' advanced technology, or the reason for their disappearance. Some thought it was a test, meant to identify worthy civilizations. Others believed it was simply art, meant to be beautiful but never opened. Dr. Vross believed it was a puzzle. He just needed to find the right approach. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning when humanity arrived at Helion 7. Humans were new to the Galactic Council, having discovered faster-than-light travel only 20 years earlier. They were strange creatures by galactic standards. They had only 2 eyes, 2 arms, and 2 legs. They were weak compared to most species, with fragile bones and soft skin. Their technology was primitive and their lifespans were short, but they were enthusiastic. The Galactic Council had decided to start cultural exchange programs with humanity, allowing human families to live and work at various stations and planets throughout known space. The Academy on Helion 7 was chosen as one of the first locations. Dr. Una Kim was a linguist who specialized in dead languages, which made her perfect for xenoarchaeology work. She had jumped at the chance to work at the famous academy. Her husband, Taiyang, was an engineer who would help maintain the station's systems. Together, they packed up their small apartment on Earth and prepared for the greatest adventure of their lives. Their 6-year-old daughter, Hana, was excited too, though for different reasons. She had seen pictures of the space station and thought it looked like a giant toy. She packed her favorite stuffed animal, 3 puzzle books, and a music box her grandmother had given her. The Kim family arrived on a Monday evening. A transport ship brought them from the jump gate to the station, and they watched through the windows as Helion 7 grew larger and larger. Hana pressed her small hands against the glass, her eyes wide with wonder. "Look at all the lights," she said in Korean. Her parents smiled. They were speaking English more often now, preparing for life among aliens, but at home they still used their native language. The station's docking bay was enormous. As they walked through it, Hana stared at the aliens moving around them. There were tall, thin creatures with blue skin and 6 fingers, short, round beings that rolled instead of walked. One alien looked like it was made entirely of purple smoke, held together by some invisible force. "Mommy, why does that one have so many eyes?" Hana asked, pointing at a Thren researcher passing by. "It's rude to point, sweetheart," Una said gently, lowering her daughter's hand. "Different species have different features, just like how your friend Emma has blonde hair and you have black hair. But way more different," Hana said seriously. Her parents laughed. The next morning, the Kim family was scheduled for a tour of the academy. Dr. Vross himself had volunteered to show them around. He was curious about humans. The reports from the Galactic Council described them as creative and unpredictable, traits that the logical Thren found both fascinating and slightly concerning. Dr. Vross met them in the main lobby, his 4 legs clicking on the polished floor as he approached. He had studied human body language and knew he should lower his body slightly to appear less intimidating. He also knew that humans communicated with something called smiling, which showed teeth. He found this strange but tried not to judge. "Welcome to the Galactic Xenoarchaeology Academy," he said in perfect English, his translator device converting his native clicks and whistles into human speech. "I am Dr. Kalen Vross. I will show you our facilities today." Una and Taeyang introduced themselves and their daughter. Hana stood slightly behind her mother, staring up at Dr. Vross with open curiosity but no fear. The Thren found this interesting. Most young beings instinctively feared species that looked so different from their own. The tour began in the research wing, where Dr. Vross explained the various projects underway. He showed them laboratories filled with ancient pottery shards, rooms where scientists carefully reconstructed broken statues, and chambers where holographic displays showed what extinct cities might have looked like. Hana tried to pay attention, but the adult talk was boring. Her mother and Dr. Vross were discussing something called phonetic drift in dead languages, and her father was asking questions about the station's power systems. She held her mother's hand and tried not to fidget. After an hour, they reached the grand exhibition hall. Dr. Vross's 3 eyes seemed to glow a bit brighter as they entered his favorite room. "This is where we keep our most important finds," he explained, gesturing with 2 of his 4 arms. Each artifact behind these force fields represents a piece of galactic history. While the adults talked, Hana's attention wandered. The exhibition hall was huge, with a ceiling so high she couldn't see the top. Artifacts of all shapes and sizes floated behind shimmering barriers of light. There were ancient weapons, strange tools, pieces of art, and things she couldn't even begin to identify. Then she saw it. In the center of the room, sitting on a white pedestal under bright lights, was a cube covered in pretty, glowing symbols. Unlike everything else, it didn't have a force field around it. It just sat there looking lonely. While her parents asked Dr. Vross about his research methods, Hannah slowly let go of her mother's hand. She took one step toward the cube, then another. No one noticed. The adults were deep in conversation about quantum scanning and archaeological protocols. Hannah walked across the empty floor, her small shoes making soft sounds on the smooth surface. She reached the pedestal and looked up at the cube. It was beautiful. The symbols seemed to dance and play across its surface, and it hummed a soft song that only she could hear. It looked like a toy. A really, really cool toy. She stood on her tiptoes and reached up, her small fingers stretching toward the mysterious object that had puzzled the galaxy's greatest minds for 3 centuries. No alarm sounded. No one shouted for her to stop. Hannah touched the Varanthi cube, and it was warm under her hand,